All right, folks. So we're Vegan Greens. Real quick, we're a very young special interest group that's affiliated to the Green Party of England and Wales. We're an intersectional group, which means that we just don't focus on the diet aspect of veganism, but we actually focus very, very heavily on intersectionality and also the principles of ahimsa, which is no life is greater than the other, and that we're all born equal. We have three main aims. One is to advocate for vegans' rights internally as well as externally. We are also setting up Vegan Greens so we can start working on some external policy work at local council levels as well as a national level. And last but not the least, we want Vegan Greens to be the natural homes for anyone who is vegan or vegan curious, thereby also expanding the party support base. VeGn for January campaign. This is the second year that we've been running this campaign. This year we've got about 20 participants, of which the CEO of the Green Party, Harriet Lamb, is one of them. We've set up a buddy system where we've assigned a vegan buddy to everyone who's participating or who's trying out going vegan in January. And so far it's been working extremely, extremely well. This session that we're hosting today is the fourth session that we've hosted this month. And all of them have had to do about nutrition, the plant-based diet, and also talking about veganism in general. We're running, during this campaign, we're also raising money for three charities. One is Animal Free Research UK, and as the name suggests, they basically fund and promote animal-free research, which is removal of animals from experiments. Second one is El Alak, which is a Palestinian-run charity that's based in Gaza, and they're raising funds to fund their desalination plant in north of Gaza. And the third one is Vegan Compassion Group that's helping people in Sudan who are undergoing a horrific genocide as we speak right now. So, by all means, please donate whatever you can, 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 pounds. No amount is too big or too small. The URL is right over here. It's tinyurl.com/VEGNFR. We'll paste this link in the chat once we start the session. Anyone who donates will be entered into our raffle draw, which is going to take place at the end of this month. And a huge thanks to Dr. Shireen Kassam for donating her book, Eating Plant-Based, to it. And also a huge thanks to Dr. Shireen Kassam for introducing us to Dr. Rebecca Jones as well as Karen Lee, who have very kindly offered to donate their books as prizes for the raffle draw. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce Dr. Shireen Kassam, and then I'll have her take over and talk about the long-term benefits of a plant-based diet. So Dr. Shireen Kassam is a consultant hematologist at King's College Hospital in London, and also a visiting professor at the University of Winchester, specializing in lymphoma treatment and plant-based nutrition. She's also the founder of Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing evidence-based education on whole food, plant-based nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. Dr. Shireen Kassam has been extremely supportive of Vegan Greens. She's also a member of Vegan Greens, so thank you for doing that. But she has helped us make connections with other nutritionists, other professionals within the medical field. And some of them have already presented during our Vegan for January campaign, and we'll be bringing some more of her colleagues and her friends, people from within her network, in hosting some more events later this year. So, Dr. Shireen Kassam, thank you so much for everything that you do, and over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Great to be here with you this evening. And I'm going to talk to you about the long-term health benefits of a plant-based diet, because hopefully some of you who may be new to a plant-based diet and a vegan lifestyle will hopefully be thinking about doing this beyond the month of January. So thinking about how we sustain good health, both physically and mentally, on a plant-based diet. And you've heard a little bit about me. I guess the important thing for this audience is that I've been vegan since 2013 and never regretted it. So there's so many reasons to talk about diet and specifically the benefits of a plant-based diet, because it really does address our key interrelated crises. And I've listed them all here. And it's going to be probably too much to go into detail, but I'll touch upon quite a lot of these, but only just to say is that we have a solution to all of these crises, and adopting a plant-based food system and a plant-based diet is really key. So, being a healthcare professional and talking about health benefits or health impacts of a plant-based diet, I'll start with our current health crisis. And I think this is relevant for anyone who's affiliated with a political party who wants to make a change. Currently, our diets in the UK are hugely unhealthy. These are data just published at the end of last year that demonstrates that less than one in 10 children and 1 in 5 adults meet their 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. And we know that's the kind of bare minimum, but hardly anyone is meeting that recommendation. Um, Only 4% of adults and children in the UK meet their fibre recommendations of 30 grams a day. And most adults and children are over-consuming saturated fat, free sugar, and free salt. And the Food Farming Countryside Commission, around 18 months ago, wrote a report that had modelled the cost implications of our unhealthy UK diet. And this cost to the NHS and the economy amounted to like an eye-watering figure of £268 billion. And that's an amount that's much more than we even put into the NHS. And those costs are because of ill health, loss of productivity, the costs of social and welfare care that is required for people with diet-related ill health. And globally, we have a very similar problem. So this isn't a problem that's unique to the UK, but unhealthy diets are responsible for around a quarter of deaths globally and around a third of premature deaths in Europe, whilst at the same time creating about a third of all greenhouse gas emissions. And unfortunately, the latest report from the Global Nutrition Foundation, published in 2022, showed that all forms of malnutrition, from hunger to obesity, are increasing. So, when we look at the global picture, the problem with our diet, and therefore these dietary risk factors, are that we are over-consuming foods that are high in sodium, which is a reflection of our reliance on pre-prepared and packaged foods. But beyond that, we're just not consuming enough of the foods that promote good health. That is fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. The corner piece of any healthy diet pattern, which is the healthy plant-based foods. And as a consequence, this is leading to excess deaths from cardiovascular disease, cancer, and type 2 diabetes. And at the time, when this was published in 2019, the study looked at 195 regions around the world and showed that 1 in 5 premature deaths were due to these dietary risk factors. And the current updated figures are that there's around 15 million premature deaths globally every year from unhealthy diets and these dietary risk factors. But when we look to the medical literature, there's a clear pattern emerging in terms of what the key components of a healthy diet are. And you can see that this in the pyramid. And I like the base of this pyramid because it emphasizes the benefits of other healthy habits, because what we eat isn't in isolation, it's how we live, how we move, how we interact with other people. So physical activity, adequate sleep, avoiding toxins, time with our human and non-human companions. But you can see that in the green, the key foods that are inherent to all healthy diet patterns are the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, mainly unsaturated sources of fat, so the plant fats like olive oil, mainly water for thirst, tea and coffee if you enjoy it. Everything else is optional and or should be limited. So nothing else is essential in the diet. And this way of eating, it doesn't matter what you call it, it's centered around these healthy plant foods. So we've all heard about the typical Mediterranean diet. The health properties come from the abundance of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, whilst limiting red and processed meat and dairy. But all of these other diets, the Nordic diet, the Mind diet for mental health, and the typical African Asian diet, and then of course what we're talking about today, a vegan diet, or in the medical literature, a healthy vegan diet is known as a whole food plant-based diet. And this is recognized in our clinical guidelines. So I showed you at the start that I'm qualified as a lifestyle medicine physician, and lifestyle medicine is a specialty within medicine that pays attention to healthy habits. It's evidence-based, and when you look at the teaching, the dietary pattern associated with lower risk of chronic disease and better outcomes and longevity is a whole food plant-based diet, half the plate fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, a quarter plant sources of protein, so legumes, nuts and seeds. Lots of herbs and spices because they're delicious, but also because they have healthy properties like being anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, and mainly water for thirst. What you do around the edges is entirely up to you. Excuse me. This way of eating can be adapted to any cultural or traditional diet pattern, but the core components are shown on the plate. And we know from decades of research that this way of eating, alongside other healthy habits, really deals with the root cause of chronic ill health, which come down to the terms that are used in these yellow boxes. So we've heard a lot about an unhealthy gut microbiome driving chronic disease, but also changes to our DNA called epigenetic changes, stress to the cells, so cellular stress, all leading to inflammation and ultimately the array of chronic physical and mental illness that is rife in our society. But at any stage, you can reverse this trajectory. So it's a kind of a good news story. Even if we haven't been focusing in on healthy habits, for the first and middle parts of our lives, it's never too late to make a difference because lifestyle interventions, including a healthy plant-rich diet, can move you away from chronic illness back to good health. And this is in our clinical guidelines. On the left, are guidelines from American Society of Preventive Cardiology, so how to prevent heart disease. It says eat a diet such as Mediterranean, healthy vegetarian, and it states an exclusively plant-based diet. All will be associated with better heart health. Similarly, for my specialty of cancer, it's all about emphasizing the healthy plant foods. And for diabetes, similarly, it says exactly the same. So, and this is not paraphrasing, these are phrases from the actual guideline that I've pulled out. So there's very convincing argument to adopt a plant-based diet for health. And I suspect many of you will already know about the impact of the food system on the climate and biodiversity crisis. We're currently already beyond the limits of 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries. But what is key to today's talk is that food systems are the largest contributor to transgression of 5 of these boundaries. So I've listed them there, including greenhouse gas emissions, land use change, freshwater change, etc. And data from WWF, published a couple of years ago now, demonstrates that for us in the UK to meet our climate and nature targets, we need to at least halve the emissions from the diet that we're eating. And the international community are quite clear in stating that there is no safe solution to climate and biodiversity crisis without a global food transformation. So what we eat is really important for planetary health. As you progressively remove animal source foods from your diet and become more and more plant-based, so for us today, talking about a vegan diet, you have the lowest environmental impact on the planet. A vegan diet has only a quarter of the impacts of a typical Western omnivorous diet. If you just think about the milk we drink, any alternative to drinking milk from cows is better for all aspects of the planet. And if you're going to do just a couple of things to your diet to make it more sustainable for the planet, it's removing red meat and dairy because they have the biggest impact. The more you can do, the greater the benefits. And people love to say, eat local. And of course, it's important for food sovereignty and security and supporting our farmers. But ultimately, it's not, it's more important what you eat rather than where it comes from, how it's been produced, where it travels, because less than 10% of emissions are from transportation. And we love talking about food waste. It's really important that a third of all food is lost throughout our food chain from, farm to fork. But the efficiency and the waste within our current food system that emphasizes food sourced from animals is huge. You can see how the efficiency of turning turning food into protein from any sort of animal is really inefficient. So you only get back 3.8% of what you put into a cow in the form of food. And of course, the smaller the animal, the more efficient, but nonetheless, it's much more efficient and less wasteful to eat directly the plant foods rather than using plants to feed animals that then have to convert that crop into calories. And globally, we use 83% of land to raise animals for food, but this only produces 37% of our protein and 18% of calories, so hugely wasteful. So the one impactful action we can take as individuals that has the greatest impact is really adopting a plant-based diet more than being carb-free or avoiding flights. I mean, everything's important, but to a lot of us, eating more plants and less animals is a simpler choice that doesn't require systemic change. Now, as a health professional, we're always concerned about antibiotic resistance and pandemic risk, and this again is driven predominantly by our food system. There's over 1 million deaths globally from antibiotic-resistant infections, and you have to remember that 70% of antibiotics globally are used in animal agriculture, so leading to more deaths than HIV and malaria. If we were to limit meat consumption to just 40 grams a day, which is the size of a sort of hamburger patty, we could reduce the amount of antibiotics in farming by 66%. So this has a much better impact or greater impact than asking doctors to prescribe less or patients to request less antibiotics. Similarly, with pandemic risk, most new and emerging infections come from animals, either because we're encroaching on their habitat and by destroying it, or because we are farming animals in intensive factory operations like most of the world's animals are farmed in. And every time I update these slides, there's a new story about bird flu. So this is just from over Christmas, millions of turkeys slaughtered to stop the spread of bird flu in the UK. And this was also happening elsewhere in the world as well. People don't think about air pollution and it being linked to animal agriculture, but it certainly is. And around a third of air pollution in our cities, these are data from the UK, comes from farms, and 80% of that is from animal farming. So this is from the nitrous oxide that's generated from the fertilizers we use, but also manure as well. So again, there's quite clear evidence that moving away from eating animals to centering our diets on plants will reduce air pollution because of less use of pesticides, but also, and fertilizers, and obviously not creating all that manure as waste. And our food system is hugely unjust at the moment. We produce enough food globally to feed 10 billion people, yet almost a billion people remain hungry globally. And even in the UK, food insecurity has widened. 1 in 7 families cannot afford to feed their children, and that's been shown just recently by the Food Foundation. But of course, at the same time, we're slaughtering 80 billion land animals and 1 trillion fishes for a food that I've essentially shown you we do not need. Every year, the flagship report from the Food Foundation is called The Broken Plate, and the stats just get worse and worse. And the most deprived in our population are least able to afford a healthy diet. Just to meet the Eat Well Guide recommendations, which are our food-based dietary guidelines, the most deprived fifth of the population would need to spend nearly half of their disposable income. And that's compared to only about sort of 10 to 12% of disposable income if you're in a higher income bracket. And the length of time in our lives spent in ill health is much greater for those that have lower incomes, and this is in part due to the unhealthy diets and the lack of access to healthy foods. And as I say, globally, it's very similar. 2.6 billion people can't afford a healthy diet currently. And of course, we expect people to work in the farming industry. Nobody grows up wanting to be a slaughterhouse worker, but by design, these are usually people from marginalized communities, migrant communities that have no choice. And there's a wealth of evidence demonstrating that people who work in slaughterhouses have poor health outcomes, both physically and mentally. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? None of us would want to do that job. And I've already mentioned, but we can't forget the injustice of our food system that slaughters daily these millions and millions of sentient animals. So luckily enough, we have a solution, the solution that addresses everything that I've talked about. And this was presented in October 2025. And this is work from the Eat Lancet Commission that initially launched in 2019, didn't have the impact it should have done, partly because of pushback from the meat and dairy lobby that spent billions of pounds, millions of pounds trying to discredit the science. But what the Eat Lancet Commission did was bring together 36 scientists from around 16 countries around the world to come up with a solution to all of these problems that I've outlined, design a diet that would not only keep the global population healthy, but within those 9 planetary boundaries that I showed at the start. And what they've come up with, and it was purely designed around the health impacts of eating various types of foods, they came up with a diet that is 87.7% plant-based. So it's very much like the plate I showed you, half fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, regular consumption of nuts and legumes as plant sources of protein, unsaturated sources of fat. And then if you are going to eat animals, they should not be more than around 13% of energy intake. So this amounts to 1 portion of red meat a week, 2 portions of poultry, 2 eggs per week, 2 portions of fish per week, and 1 portion of dairy daily. But what they're clear, and this type of eating is modeled to be able to prevent those 15 million premature deaths that are occurring every year, but at the same time, also reduce the use of antibiotics for reasons I've described by 42%. And in the launch event, which was the relaunch in October 2025, the presenters clearly stated that there's different ways of meeting these recommendations. It doesn't matter what you call your diet, and this is poached from their slide set, that this way of eating can be met by a flexitarian, pescatarian, vegetarian, and a vegan diet. And various studies have demonstrated that this way of eating would significantly reduce the risk of premature mortality, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and overweight and obesity, whilst at the same time meeting our climate targets. And although the UK hasn't updated their food-based dietary guideline, there's quite a lot on the government website around healthy eating for people and planet. And again, I've taken the exact quotes from this, but highlighted how even on our government website, you can see messaging that it reflects the current science that a diet rich in plant foods have significant environmental impact and benefits for health and the environment, and that people who choose to limit their consumption of animals can meet nutrient requirements from a varied and balanced plant-based diet. So that's great. I mean, there's no uh, there is consensus there. There's no disagreement. And importantly for us all thinking about a vegan diet and a 100% plant-based diet, the British Dietetic Association confirmed that well-planned vegan diets can support healthy living in all people of all ages. So that's great. No concerns there. How do we know a 100% plant-based diet is good for us? Well, we've got some ecological data from regions around the world where people live the longest, healthiest lives. And this is a picture of Dan Buettner. If you haven't watched Live to 100 on Blue Zone, on the Blue Zones project that he conducted, it's free if you subscribe to Netflix. He described 5 regions around the world where people live the longest, healthiest lives, more likely to get to 100 years in good health. And he described 9 common shared lifestyle habits that these regions or people living in these regions share. But when it comes to food, it's predominantly plant-based. One of the regions, Loma Linda in California, there's large numbers of vegan and vegetarians living there. They go mainly whole, so in rather than processed foods, mainly whole. Beans are a key part of their daily diet, being the main source of protein. Drink mostly water for thirst, snack on nuts, go easy on the fish, eliminate eggs, slash the sugar, reduce the dairy, retreat from meat. So essentially everything I've been talking about. And then we've got data from 2 large prospective cohort studies that inform us about the long-term health impacts of a vegan diet specifically. So these large cohorts of participants that have been followed for over 3 decades now. One cohort from America called the Adventist Health Study 2, and then from here in the UK called the EPIC Oxford Study. Around a third of participants are vegetarian or vegan. And there's been dozens of papers, literally. But in essence, they both shown very similar findings that as you progressively remove animal source foods from the diet, you're much more likely to be a healthy weight. So vegans much more likely to be in a healthy BMI range. You slash your risk of type 2 diabetes as a vegan by 50%. You reduce your risk of hypertension as a vegan by 63%, and you're much more likely to have a cholesterol in the normal range, so your blood cholesterol in the normal range, because your diet is low in saturated fat, virtually absent in cholesterol, high in fiber, high in nutrients that all help to keep blood lipids healthy. And this overall reduces our risk of the top killer of men and women globally, heart disease, by 25%. So that's a big tick for cardiovascular disease benefits. If you look at data from the UK Biobank, again, a large prospective cohort study looking at health outcomes in people living in the UK, they've looked at different diet patterns and their impact in cancer. And what they've shown is that people on a meat-free diet, so vegetarians, and that included vegans in that analysis, have much lower risk of cancer, reduced by 14%, with particular benefits for breast and prostate cancer. So again, the second top killer in the UK, cancer, reduced risk with a plant-based diet. In non-white populations, we've got the sushi study from Taiwan that again followed large numbers of people over time, and again a third of the participants are veggie or vegan, and they've shown very, very similar outcomes to the results from white populations that I've described. And interestingly, and relevant for all of us who want to make policy change, reduced medical expenditure. So vegetarians and vegans in Taiwan in this study spend less on medical care because they take less medications and they visit their doctor much less as well. And that was around a 15% reduction in medical expenditure, which would be great if we could achieve that for the NHS. Now, there's always things to be aware of. There's always pros and cons of any diet pattern, and all diet patterns need an element of planning so that we get all our nutrients. The one concern that has arisen around a fully plant-based diet, or at least a meat-free diet, is a potential increase in the risk of bone fractures. So I've listed the 4 studies there that have demonstrated this. But I think there's always, as with everything, there's nuance in the data. The people at risk are females of low body mass index, meaning less than 22.5, and if they're not getting sufficient vitamin D, B12, protein, and calcium. So really, these studies show that diet quality are key, and if you're not appropriately planning your plant-based diet, there may be a risk of poor bone health. But additional studies have shown that if we adhere to guidelines on physical activity and do weight-bearing resistance activity, we can indeed mitigate some of these risks. So it comes back to general healthy habits, and nutrition alone is never going to be the be-all and end-all of good health, even though it is a cornerstone. And it's clear, however, that plant-based foods and plant-based diets really can be used therapeutically. There's numerous examples in the medical literature around using food as medicine, but this, I think, is a nice example from the UK. There's a great charity called the Alexandra Rose Charity, mainly working out of Tower Hamlets. They've been working with the community and GPs to give vouchers for fruits and vegetables to people who have health conditions and who are food insecure. And what they've shown is that people who participate in their voucher scheme, 80% now eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, which is compared to that less than 10% I showed you at the start. Majority report health and well-being improvements. 7 in 10 have seen significant drops in blood pressure confirmed by their medical professional, and their visits to doctor has been dropped. So we know that not only the vegan diet is kinder to the animals and the planet, it's going to actually improve the health of the nation as well. And it's not just about surviving, it's not just about lowering cardiac risk, diabetes risk, etc. You can achieve your best self on a fully plant-based diet. This has been shown in the literature. The latest meta-analysis is shown there, but on the right you can see some familiar faces, all athletes at the top of their game, or at least have been in the past, or consuming a fully plant-based diet. And the sort of pushback around cost is not borne out in the literature. So again, this large study looking at global food prices conducted out of Oxford University used World Bank food prices to look at the cost of the typical diet being consumed, and if we were to shift to a more plant-based and or a vegan diet. And what they showed that in high income countries, eating a healthy plant-based diet, like I've described, full of whole foods, would reduce our food cost by a third. And I'll come back to cost in a minute. Now, people always like to describe, I should say the media or those with other agendas like to describe a vegan or a plant-based diet as being A, restrictive and B, nutrient deficient. I think anyone who's been following a plant-based diet know that it's actually full of abundance. You know, we have more than 20,000 edible plants. There's no shortage of choice. It's understanding, how to use these array of plant foods. So restriction is not something that I have witnessed. But when it comes to nutrient adequacy, um, what the table is trying to show you is an analysis of around 145 studies demonstrating that regardless of what diet pattern you have, whether it's vegan, vegetarian, whether you're a meat eater, there's some nutrients that may be lower than usual and some that may be higher in intake. And when you scan the table, it doesn't matter what diet pattern you eat, you need to be aware of certain nutrients that need to be emphasized and others that are naturally abundant in that way of eating. And of course, for anyone on a vegan diet, supplementing with vitamin B12 is non-negotiable, needs to be either in fortified foods or as a supplement. Vitamin D for everybody in the winter months, regardless of diet pattern. And then you need to know where to get the other nutrients like calcium, iodine, iron, zinc, etc. It's not difficult. One needs an awareness. Similarly, for children, it's exactly the same. There's pros and cons of every way of eating. I've already shown you that the British Dietetic Association state that a plant-based diet can meet nutrient requirements at all ages. And so please, please, please just ignore all of these headlines. I mean, this was out just a few weeks ago, wasn't it? Vegan children skinnier and shorter. Well, when you actually look at the study that the Daily Fail was reporting, you can see that actually vegan children grow absolutely appropriately for based on their genetics, so the height of their parents, which is really important, and it's still all within the normal range. So I'm not sure we really care if a child is 1 or 2 centimeters smaller, if it's appropriate for their genetics and still within the normal growth trajectory. So I'm going to just finish my talk around a project that I'm involved in. And I've seen Gio on the call, one of our nursing leads at Plant-Based Health Professionals, and she's been working on as well. So really one of the ways to change behaviour more than just individual diet change is by addressing public sector catering. It should really showcase the science, what's healthy, what's sustainable. So it really gives us an opportunity to educate, role model, normalize plant-based meals, showcase them to be delicious. The good news is that plant-based eating is universally inclusive to all religious, cultural, ethical beliefs and can be allergen-free. So it's a kind of win-win when it comes to resources in public sector. And in the health sector, we've been quoting this example for a few years, and hopefully we'll be more and more quoting examples from the UK. But Eric Adams, despite the controversy around him, did enact a very good policy around catering in 11 city hospitals in New York. So the public hospitals, or 11 of them, for the last 3 or 4 years, have now been serving plant-based meals as a default option. So patients and staff get first and second choice is the plant-based meal, the chef special. It's incentivized. And what they showed, so this is without restricting choice, so takes account of the fact that people don't like to restrict choice in hospital when people are unwell. It just presents the meals in a way that we know supports people to make that better choice using behavioral science. They've shown from their data that more than 50% of eligible patients stick with that plant-based meal, that diner satisfaction remains very high. They've reduced emissions from catering by 36%, and importantly, they've reduced the cost of a plant-based meal compared to an animal-based meal. So a plant-based meal is 59 cents cheaper than the animal-based meal. So you can imagine the hundreds of thousands of savings when you think of the millions of meals that are served in hospitals. And this approach has been modelled in 2 studies here in the UK, one from the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and one from the Office of Health Economics. And that if we all shifted to plant-based defaults in public sector catering, especially in the NHS, we could save £74 million. And depending on, which modelling study, the wins could be up to 2 billion if we were to really significantly reduce meat consumption and more eat a plant-based diet because of the benefits to health, climate, and the cost of food. So we've brought this initiative that I described in New York City to the UK. It's called Plants First Healthcare. We're now a coalition, so with my organisation, Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, in collaboration with Greener by Default, that conducted the programme in New York City and elsewhere in the world, but also working with ProVeg, Real Zero, and My NutriWeb. And we launched on World Food Day back in October 24. And we delivered a letter to the Department of Health and to the NHS England. And this last year has been spent building relationships with NHS England and their food team, which is now working really nicely, building the coalition so that we can offer what is a free service to the NHS to implement plant-based defaults. And we're starting to get some results. So this is a free article online on the Doctor magazine around the work conducted at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital in their staff canteen. Oh, I thought I'd put up some results. So what they've done is they've piloted 50-50 split. So there's 50% plant-based versus 50% animal-based meals. They've subsequently defaulted to oat milk in their barista machines. Diner satisfaction rate remained high, and they've reduced meat consumption by about a third overall, with 40% reduction in emissions. And this is without restricting choice, bit of education, placement, labelling, delicious food. And this is one just small pilot, which they're scaling out to the wards. And now Geo's Hospital at the North Mid, which is spearheaded, is piloting this in the staff canteen, and there's others that will be announced and reported on in the coming year. We're lucky enough now to be able to write in the medical journals. So a recent article I wrote in the Royal College of Physicians journal is why the medical profession is reluctant to talk about diet change. And it really needs to be normalised as part of our practice, because I hope I've shown you that embracing a plant-based diet is now not only an ethical imperative, but there's benefits spanning individual, environmental, sustainability, equitable resource distribution, and of course, global health justice as well. I mean, I suspect I'm talking to, the already initiated and vegans, but I think what people can do when they're thinking about this change is just the simple steps of thinking about your everyday meals and how you can make them more plant-based. Swapping your mincemeat to lentils, swapping your chicken to tofu, using some of the newer plant-based meat alternatives, which we know are healthier than the meat-based. Do it as a community, which you guys are doing, is always easier to sustain. And one of the pushbacks we always hear is that, oh, I want to go vegan, but my family isn't. And, so we know what social support is like. And for us as healthcare professionals, we need to start asking people about diet. The leading cause of ill health in our patients is their diet. I offer this course at the University of Winchester, so if anyone wants to upskill, it's fully online, available remotely. These are the two movies I've been involved in that are available on your streaming sites. Eating Our Way to Extinction is free, actually. It's very good. And then we have loads of resources for free, which I know Prashant and the team have been highlighting in the WhatsApp group. But please just use them and share them and tell people about them, because that's what they're there for. We have an amazing podcast, so please listen in. Claire and Daisy, two GPs, who will also vegan and plant-based, present that with amazing guests, including from our membership. And these are the two books I've been involved in, and you might be lucky enough to win one as a raffle prize. So thank you very much. I'll stop there and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for that very rich presentation, Dr. Shireen Kassam. There are a lot of resources that I would like to follow up on. Certainly your podcast, I'll start listening to that. We now have about 20 minutes for questions. So those in attendance, please do feel free to share your questions in the chat, as well as comments. We should have plenty of time to get to all of them. And there's one question already from Prashant, who asks, could you shed some light on collagen and if vegans are deficient? Also, how can we get vegan collagen or consume vegan collagen?
Well, I mean, I guess this is more of a sort of wider question around kind of supplements and nutrient sufficiency. As you might imagine, collagen has a big industry like pushing out supplements. Nobody needs to consume collagen. It is a protein. It's rich in proline and glycine from what I remember. So two specific amino acids. Um, Ultimately, when you eat a protein, doesn't matter if it's collagen or something else, your body's going to digest down the protein in the stomach and in the gut and digest it down to amino acids, which then get absorbed. Those amino acids don't know that they have to make collagen. They're going to go to wherever they're going to be needed, your muscle, your enzymes. So, just because you eat collagen doesn't go to collagen. It's like saying, just because you eat animal flesh, it doesn't mean you're going to become strong. I mean, that's a stupid myth. You can't do that unless you're actually, creating an environment where your body needs to build more muscle, which is only through strength building. So, yeah, nobody needs collagen, let alone worrying about, well, yeah, I mean, nobody needs collagen, full stop.
That's very reassuring to hear because my algorithm has been pushing it on me, and I'm
Ooh,
suddenly wondering how this thing that I'd never heard of, I'm suddenly deficient in, and it is impossible to get vegan. So that's very reassuring to hear. Thank you. There's a comment from Richard that you might want to respond to, saying, "Brilliant presentation by the wonderful Shireen. Can you share the presentation, please?" And Richard, the recording of the entire session will be shared on our YouTube channel. Also, we're campaigning for Bristol City Council to adopt the aim of Eat Lancet. And this encourages schools and restaurants and community organizations in Bristol City to change too. Can you come and present at an event in Bristol?
Well, that's very kind of invitation. But luckily, we have lots of good and amazing members already in Bristol. And I think you've met Vina already in your group, who's part of the VeGn Greens. She's just moved to Bristol, so she should come and present. And she's got really great credentials, being a GP and sustainability lead for the Royal College of GPs, and come to all our conferences and things. So she's well up to speed on everything. So as much as I'd love to travel everywhere, the reason for our network is so that we can support you wherever you are, ideally. And Vina comes to mind. There's probably other people, so sorry if I've forgotten people out there. But yeah, so hopefully we can link you up with somebody appropriate closer to you.
Thank you for that. That is very helpful to hear. If you have additional questions, please do go ahead and drop them in the chat. And while we're waiting for that, I was wondering whether you could elaborate a bit more on policy. You did speak about the studies that are out there. You spoke about the ways in which, well, I think different arguments for veganism could appeal to people across the political spectrum, particularly by focusing on savings for the NHS. Could you say anything else about how plant-based health professionals have been working with policymakers
Yeah.
and any recent successes that you've had?
Thank you. Yeah, so although we perhaps don't have a specific work stream around policy, what we try and do is use our kind of credentials, as it were, to be part of other working groups. So where we've had some success is we're a member organisation of the UK Health Alliance on Climate Change, which is the sort of umbrella policy organisation representing all the medical societies and royal colleges. So their members are think people like the Royal College of Physicians, surgeons, etc. So they represent through their membership over 1 million healthcare professionals, and they have an array of commitments relating to climate and health, and they are very on board with plant-based diets. They've signed the plant-based treaty after I put them in touch with them, so that I thought was a #1 win. Then they wrote their commitments that we've contributed to that says, eat plant-based. They've supported our initiatives, and then they also collaborate with the Lancet Countdown to write the UK priorities, and I was able to write the priority around food this time around, calling for a plant-based transition both in farming and for diet change, etc. So we're sort of using our membership within the wider group to be able to, because I think we feel like we're still the only org that's focused on diet change when it comes to sort of sustainability aspects. So we do that a little bit with the UK Health Alliance on Climate Change. We've written a toolkit for them to share with their members, who are all the Royal Colleges of Medical Societies, to support them to transition to plant-based catering at events and conferences. I mean, it's an absolutely no-brainer, but people still feel unsure and uncertain how to approach this with venues and caterers, and then what types of meals and foods to ask for. But we're already seeing great things. So, for example, my one of our team members, LJ Smith, she's part of the British Thoracic Society. Their summer conference is always fully plant-based. I'm part of the British Society of Haematology, so the meetings I'm involved in, I'm going like, it needs to be plant-based, and it often is. So, we're able to, through our sort of internal contacts, be able to try and change, but having the resources available to support people to do that. And then policy wise, I think we're happy to now be in a good position with NHS England talking about the plant-based defaults in hospitals. It'll take time, but in the last year we've come from really annoying them badly to now being in a good position to work with the Net Zero Food team. So let's see how that progresses next year. And then with some other partners, the Vegan Society and Food Rise, we've put together a policy briefing around the National Food Strategy. So everyone will know that the Labour government is currently in the middle of, or at least DEFRA is formulating the National Food Strategy. We're expecting a draft in spring. So the last few months has been people's and organisations' opportunity to try and influence. So we put together our 10-point plan. It was endorsed by 48 different organisations across the spectrum of environment, health, and animals. And we managed to get a meeting with at least one of the representatives of the National Food Strategy and various sort of MP type meetings as well. So those are our small bits of policy. Obviously, want to see more, and our focus specifically is on healthcare. So we will continue pushing there.
Very encouraging to hear good news, and also that being a pain in someone's side and causing frustrations can be rewarding at times, and can turn into a productive relationship. So there are several more questions in the chat now, and I'll start with one from Kay that's related to what you were just speaking about. Kay asks, are you aware of any plans or campaigns in the NHS for better nutritional training for GPs, etc.? How much training do they currently receive?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of our focus areas is GP education, and also medical students. Like you can't do everything as a small org, so we've decided to start at the front end and then, get doctors as they qualify into their, final kind of profession, as it were. I think what has changed recently is this focus on lifestyle medicine, which I alluded to. So it is a growing kind of adjuvant specialty that all doctors sort of what can incorporate into their practice, and it's really had a boom. So supporting patients and bringing into your practice the key pillars of lifestyle medicine. And as I described, we're quite lucky that the science aligns with what we're talking about. So lifestyle medicine practice also supports a plant-based diet. So people are learning about plant-based diets from different directions. Either they come to it through lifestyle medicine, through sustainability initiatives, or through our work, I hope. So we teach in GP training schemes. We also teach in 9 medical schools, and we're wanting to ramp that up as well. So yeah, more needs to be done, but I feel like that there is some change happening. Yeah.
Nice to
hear. I might just add though, I mean, it's not necessarily the focus of a GP to be trained. We can't be trained in everything as doctors. And I think, society needs to support us on a community basis, the food environment, all of that. So it's not just because your doctor doesn't know the ins and outs of nutrition. I think they need to know its importance, the core principles, but you're never going to have a GP who's going to take you through a meal plan, etc. There's other professionals that do that. And as I say, it needs to be part of our everyday.
That's an important point to remember. Thanks for that. The next question is also from Kay, who asks, what are your opinions on various sweeteners? I use them to make some foods more palatable, but are natural added sugars better?
So sweeteners and there's sort of artificial sweeteners. So I mean, I think it depends how much, the small amounts here and there to make your, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, or whatever you're putting it in, more palatable so you eat them is clearly a good thing. I mean, I think, the problem comes when you overconsume some of these things. So some added sugar is never going to be the be all and end all of a diet. I think, in populations, which is pretty much all of us, when we're over consuming added sugars, so more than 10% of energy from free sugars, for example, if you swap that sugar for artificial sweeteners, it does appear to be better for health. But of course, the ultimate is not to be using added sugar or artificial sweeteners. But I think what you do around the sort of 10-15% of your diet that isn't exactly perfect is not going to be the thing that impacts your overall health outcome. So I don't think we have to put that pressure on us, and it's much better to find a way to eat the healthy foods. And if adding a bit of salt or sugar or seasoning or whatever it is helps you do that, I think that's the main thing.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. So there are two questions that are somewhat similar in their scope, so I'm going to ask them together. Tony asks, I read about various fruits and veggies being a problem for some people, such as onions, nuts, tomatoes, and citrus fruit. Can you say something around these? And then Richard asks, potatoes seem to be not highly valued in a better whole foods plant-based diet. How come?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's always going to be some foods that some people don't get on well with, like so tomatoes being part of the nightshade family, that can trigger certain things like migraines or autoimmune conditions. Some people are allergic to nuts. Some people might have irritable bowel and things like onion and garlic, which are high in the kind of FODMAP, that you need to digest those sort of carbohydrates, and that can be tricky. But I think that that's the finer detail, and everyone can benefit from eating more plants. And then some people need a little bit more assistance from a nutritionist or dietitian to sort of tweak their diet if things are not working for them. So I don't see that as a major problem, but like with anything, I think some extra support might be needed for some people who have special conditions. So the potato thing, yeah, good question. I mean, I think most of this, and the Eat Lancet sort of very much minimizes the amounts that they sort of have an allowance for starchy veg. And I think mainly because the data around potato consumption is coming from the typical Western diet. And it really depends what the makeup of the rest of the diet is. I mean, it's certainly true that, well, we need to have a varied diet, and potatoes shouldn't be just the the only kind of vegetable one eats, or starchy veg, to the detriment of other fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things. There's no doubt that whole grains are better for health, for example, than eating potatoes. But I think it's more around the overall dietary pattern, and then how you cook things. So it's clear that the worst problem with potatoes is that a lot of us eat them fried and with salt and all the rest. But if you're having them as boiled or jacket, or cooled and then reheated so it has more resistant starch, that can actually be beneficial. But it shouldn't be the only thing in your diet, because there are better foods to eat for health, like leafy greens and whole grains and beans and things.
And am I right that sweet potatoes have a better nutritional profile than white potatoes?
Yeah, potentially, yes, no, absolutely. And in general, the kind of darker the fruit or vegetable, the more the antioxidants in it, because hence they're able to keep that color. Yeah, so the orange sweet potato and better than the white, but maybe the purple even better than the orange kind of thing.
Just had purple sweet potatoes for lunch, so I'm happy to hear that. Wonderful. So those are all the questions that we have in the chat. But final call. Does anyone have any additional questions or comments before we close? Kay does say thank you. I need sugar in my tea, so I think she found that reassuring.
That's fine. And I've just put the link to that toolkit for how to support institutions, conference goers to make their conference plant-based. So yeah, do let us know if that's any use to you guys, because yeah, it does. I mean, obviously the medical profession deliver CPD through big kind of conferences, in-person conferences and things. So it's a really great way to kind of showcase diet change.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shireen Kassam, for being with us for not one but two events, including a very thorough question and answer session on Monday. So if you haven't had the chance to watch that, it is now on the VeGn Greens YouTube page, and there's a lot of really rich information there. This presentation is also going to be shared online. So I know Richard was asking about sharing the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see that online as well, Richard. Prashant has just put the link in the chat. And thank you to everyone for participating in our Vegan for January seminars and campaign. It's been, I think, a really enjoyable and productive month. I, for one, have learned a lot about a plant-based diet and healthy habits that I didn't necessarily know that I had, which is encouraging. And we are looking forward to continuing to work with you, Dr. Shireen, and your colleagues at Plant-Based Health Professionals. It's been a very useful relationship thus far, and we'd certainly like to help to build your profile and the policies that you're advocating within the Green Party. We will be in touch later in the month with the results of the raffle, which includes 3 books by 3 wonderful plant-based health professionals, and with more information as well about the results of our fundraiser. But until then, thank you everyone once again for joining us.